Hello, welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and I have a really cool lady with us today. Someone that I've recently met that I swear we must have grown up in the same family and just not known it. So this is Cyndilu Miller, and um, she loves to sing some of the same church songs I grew up with. She has a heart for God and for people. She enjoys having a lot of fun. And she moved across the world for love. How beautiful is this? Okay, so we're going to talk to her. First, I am going to give her a chance to share this interview on her page so that her people can watch it.
I'm working on that. Ooh,
I am really glad you guys are here today. Let's see here. Boom, ba, boom, boom, boom,
share.
boom, boom, boom,
Hey,
boom.
I'm figuring this out. This is kind of fun.
Isn't it?
Share to a group, write a post. Okay, this is working. Share with the public. I guess it's going on my personal page. That's all right. That'll be fun.
Exactly.
Hey,
All
catch
right.
me live.
So Cindy and Lou and I met in actually a collaboration challenge. Did we meet in the podcast class?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, we launched, actually, gosh, I guess it's been a month now.
I know.
We launched podcast through a course that Young Pratt at Our Young Creators did. It was podcast in a weekend. And if you want to launch a podcast, I will give a free commercial right now for Our Young Creators. Young Pratt makes things so super simple and it doesn't take a lot of extra time. I was thinking, oh, how am I going to juggle one more thing? And truthfully, it's the most fun I've had in I can't tell you how long. And it doesn't take really any extra time, but what, maybe 45 minutes and that's it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I use so Young Pratt taught us to use things we're already doing to get the podcast on every possible all the popular podcast sources, and also on Facebook and other social media. So tell your friends. But City Lou, I'm so glad we met because through that we've actually started chatting and now talking. We sleep at totally different times because City Lou is in the southern hemisphere across the world. And so we've somehow managed to find a time where we're both awake today. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, City Lou, for being with us.
Well, you're awake today and I'm awake tomorrow. So, or I'm awake today and you're awake yesterday. One of those ones.
So I need to stop living in the past, really.
I'm living in the future all the time now.
My go getter friend. All right. Well, City Lou, you don't sound like you're from New Zealand.
No, no, I married a Kiwi. I married into New Zealand. So there are a few phrases now that I say with a New Zealand accent, or I don't know if it's an accent or if it's just how they would say it. So in
Mm-hmm.
America, it's a garage. Here, it's a garage,
Ah,
things like that. So, and I have a boot, which has nothing to do with anything that goes on my feet. It's what's in the back of the car and often called a trunk in America. So it's
cool.
been fun these 6 years learning the difference between this and that.
So if I've got junk in my trunk, you've got scoot in your boot.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
And you also use lippy. What's lippy?
Lippy is lipstick. It's,
Love it. Now, you started out over here in Vermont, did you say?
yes, I met my husband in Vermont, and my husband was a born Kiwi. However, he was in Vermont for 29 and a half years total, including the year or a couple of years that we were together. So he arrived in America in 1984 to marry a woman, not this one. So I and he are we're both in our second marriages, and we both found that love actually, and that you could be
Awesome.
happy and married, and they could go together. I don't think either of us before we met one another thought that that was actually a possibility. So it's
And
been brilliant.
I want to share something there because that actually makes a lot of sense to me. I'm in my second marriage. My husband is in his third marriage. And I believe marriage should last forever. But I also have seen a trend, a tendency. When we first get married, the first time, a lot of times people try to control each other or they cling to each other. When Eve, Adam and Eve sinned and God told them what their future was going to look like, one thing that he said was, Eve, you're going to cling to your husband. And I honestly think that we carry that way too far. We when in my first marriage, I tried to be my husband's second skin. I gave up my individuality to try to be whatever he needed me to be, and that was unattractive to him, and also made me insecure and controlling. And I don't know if you went through that, but I know that actually it took me a little ways into my second marriage to quit being that way, to figure out that this was not the way I was meant to be. And it wasn't a way to make a permanent marriage, even though I thought I knew everything that would make a marriage last forever. Have you
Yeah,
experienced anything like that?
I have actually. And Be Bold Jew, where we help people take their life's twists and turns and turn them into something beautiful, is exactly that. It is helping people to discover who they are when they come to that place in their life where they've laid their life down for their husband or their children or for some other reason, to the point that they have let go completely of who they are, their own dreams, their own desires, their own inspirations, and what they want to do, what they love in life. And some people don't even know anymore what they love.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea who they are. They're completely lost. And I think everybody comes to that point in their life at some point. Not maybe not everybody, but a lot of women, especially, I
Yes.
think, that are ending marriages or their children are all moving out of the house and they're having some major identity crisis as to who am I. So I help take them through different assessments so they can learn who they are, because that's how I found out who I was. I took assessment after assessment after assessment. So if you don't like taking tests, Be Bold You is probably not for you. Just listen to the inspirational podcast where I'm talking to people who have already figured out who they are and what they want to do in life. And that's the whole purpose of the Be Bold You podcast. At this point, it's been interview series, interviewing people who are boldly living the person that they love being.
Yes. And Be Bold You. I'm going to actually share that right here so that everybody can see it. But that is actually the BE and then BOLDYOU. I love that you do that because for me, I actually had to spend hours journaling. And I worked the night shift. And of course, all I could think about was that my life was falling apart. And so, there was time to journal. But a lot of my journaling, after you cry and whine for a while and pray that God will change everything, um, you start to recognize that maybe the change needs to start right here. And so I journaled a lot of lists. What do I like? What do I think I like because he liked it? And what do I really like? I learned that I love the blues. He didn't like the blues. It was old. He wanted everything new. I love the blues. I like
God.
music too. I like pretty much everything old. It's fun. And so I started discovering things I liked and things I thought I might like and tried and said, yeah, it's not me. So I'm glad you help people find out, who they are and where they're going. You've actually been helping me this week in last week, I guess, in Option Ocean. A lot of you know that I invited some people who had lives that were authentic and God led and who had experiences that I felt might help people to come together and write the devotional book Option Ocean. And Cyndilu is part of that collaboration. So, Cyndilu, I'm so glad that you joined us there because we're going to help people find their identity at an earlier age, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
I think so. We could save so much time. So, what in the world? We're all just dying to know. What brought you from Vermont all the way to New Zealand? You fell in love with this man, and then, well, he'd been in Vermont for 29 years. Why didn't he just love Vermont enough to shovel snow? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
because
hello.
it's so lovely. I'm from Florida. What took you, and how did you know that it was right, that this is where God was leading you all the way across the world? And how did you come to grips with the fact that you were, we all say we're going to stay in touch, but you really do lose track of a lot of people, especially when you're living in such a different time zone. How did you come to that decision, and what did it feel like?
Well, that takes you back 8 to 10 years before. I can't remember exactly. I said 10 years yesterday, but I realized it might have only been 8 years before I even met Robin, before I knew who he was. And my girlfriend and I were doing a ministry where we had people coming into us from all over the world. They were coming from Peru, from Australia, and coming into our little garage and sharing with us things that God was doing around the world. So we
That's
stood in her, yeah, that was pretty cool. It was called the White Horse Cave. And that's a whole nother, we don't have time for that one right now. So that's a whole nother conversation. But we were standing there in her dining room lounge, and we had a map on the wall, and we were like, where do we want to go? What do we want to put on our kind of like God list? And so we started naming different countries because Peru had come to us. So we're like, oh yeah, we want to go to Peru. And she wanted to go to India. I want to go to Africa. And then I pointed down to New Zealand, and I'm like, I want to go to New Zealand. I said, but I know that I can't go until I'm ready to stay because I'm going to want to stay for a while. So
wow.
I'm still in my first marriage. Nothing's fallen apart there. Then we had a house fire. That all got blown apart. And that's another story, which people can find in other interviews that I've done with folks. And I ended up single again. And after a couple of years, a few years of healing, and I started thinking about being married again and maybe looking for a husband again, because I decided I didn't want to do that until I was healed enough to have one and have them not be full of my crap. So,
I really
uh,
respect that.
yeah, it's really important to go through that healing journey. We'll sidestep just for a second because I really feel led to say this, that if, lots of times when the divorce happens and you come 6 months, a year later, and you look at that person who you divorced and you're like, that's not who I divorced. They're like way better than the person that I divorced. And
Right.
it's true because everybody grows through a divorce.
Yeah.
Both of you grow in different ways. And sometimes it's that divorce that it takes in order for that person to grow or for you to grow. And I've had people, friends of mine, who've gotten remarried again later to the same husband, and it's worked fine. And it is that growth. It's whatever takes that growth. So I'm not sure who that was for, but there must be somebody that needed to hear that. So I met my husband in 2008. We got married in 2009. He was from New Zealand, and my friends at church in 2007, 2008 were saying, Robin's from New Zealand, because they knew I wanted to go, because we'd already talked about it. And I'm like, no, 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 he's not my type. No, 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 no. But every time I would tell my best friends, my list of what I was looking for, they're like, well, it sounded an awful like Robin. No, no, no. So he was working nights, and he was a bit scruffy because he was working nights and he was coming to church, but he was exhausted. So he wasn't, putting himself together. So that's why I was like, no, I don't want a scruffy man. I want somebody who's put together. He
Okay.
is the most wonderful, amazing, scruffy man I will ever, ever, ever have the honor and privilege of being married to.
Oh, that makes my day.
So within a month of talking to him, I already knew, okay, I'm going to marry this guy. So it took me another 11 months to kind of get him on board, but well, not quite 11 months, but 6 or 7.
So you had to actually, talk to him and not just look at him to tell. I
Had
think
to
that's
talk to him.
wonderful. And you've been
Yeah.
together how long?
We got married in 2009, so it has
Yeah.
been 9 years.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad. And are you happy that you went to New Zealand?
Oh my gosh. I found home. I did find home when I arrived here. I have no desire to move back to the US. I love my children. I love you all. Mwah, 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 mwah. I miss you, children.
Aw.
But I don't miss you enough to move back.
We have eternity, right?
The reality is, I don't miss you enough to move back. I'm sorry.
Well, you were
Um,
actually back in time to spend time with his mother while she was living. And I know we
yeah,
moved to Tulsa for the same reason to spend time with my dad and grandparents while they were living. And you can't replace that time. That is a well worth, I mean, God just blesses that. So I think I hate to say this, we need to do this more. But at the moment, we're at the end of our time. And so, real quick, if you had a tip for someone who's wondering if this is the right decision or who's planning to do a big, expatriate kind of move, what would you advise them?
sell everything.
Ah, don't try to drag it with you.
Don't try to drive. We did take 200 cubic feet. So we got one small little pod. So take your favorite things, take the things that actually research the country and find out what things are actually expensive there. So
Mm,
a lot of places like New Zealand had a trade me. I wish I'd kind of done that a little bit more because we probably would have brought Robin's carpentry tools. So I didn't realize how expensive they were here. So I would definitely do that. Explore the country and find out what are the items that actually cost a lot more there.
and get rid of everything else.
Yeah, pretty
Makes
much.
sense.
Pretty
Well,
much. I mean,
this has been so too short. We will need to get together again. I'm so glad you're in my life, Cindy Lou.
yeah.
God bless you in your Be Bold You business and in your, the time that you have with the people who matter to you over there. And God bless your kids who are still here and haven't discovered how great it is. I am so grateful to all of you for watching and if you're listening to the podcast for tuning in. If you haven't been to the podcast yet, go to my podcast at One Moment Wiser and subscribe, and you'll get these updates. But also check out Cindy Lou's podcast. Cindy Lou, what is the podcast that you have?
So it's Be Bold You podcast.
Okay, Be
That's what it's called.
Bold You, YOU podcast, and it is on all the great podcast distributors, right?
It is. And I'm getting ready to actually launch a second podcast
That's pretty
called
cool.
Promise Sounds, which I knew you were wanting me at some point to sing, possibly. So they'll have to tune into that.
I guess so. We'll check it out. Thank you so much. You have a great day. This is Christy Bridges with One Moment Wiser. I'll see you soon. Hi. One Moment Wiser. I said that right. Hey guys.